Mr. Stochița, for some time there has been a growing number of non-EU workers, often from Asia, in Romania. Um, how many workers from non-EU countries are currently in Romania, and what is the general situation around them?
Hello. It's fairly difficult to estimate exactly how many we have currently because some of them have left, a couple of their permits have expired, I'm sure. What I can say with accuracy is the fact that every year for the past 2 to 3 years, we've been getting 100,000 of them, roughly that's the number. So Romania every year decides uh, on the amount of foreign workers they can bring into the country, and it's been 100,000 for the past years. They've tried to increase it to 140,000, but because of the fact that the authorities that deal with migration directly do not have the capacity to process that, they've left it to 100,000. So, I mean, if we do the, I've seen some figures saying that there are 400,000, there are less, there are more. I think what's important is more to look at how many of them come every year. I mean, not so many of them leave for Germany or leave for back home, but every year 100,000 of them coming into the country is a relatively new phenomenon for Romania, given that the way we experienced migration was mostly outwards. So we were moving out of the country, and now we're getting people coming into the country, which definitely changes the demographic balance of the place.
What drives these people to make the effort to get to Romania? How they do they feel in your country, and what problems do they face?
The effort is the same as a Bulgarian or Romanian worker wanting a better living condition. We can compare it to someone from Russia or from any other city in Bulgaria that find very little to no employment in the city where they are, and they want to get some money to help their family and build a better life, not only for their family but for the people in their community, maybe. So that's one of the problems. The second one that we often do not talk about is the informal employment. um, Formal employment, as we know it, having a contract or at least having a contract for some of the work we're doing in the economy, it's a relatively isolated phenomenon to North America, Europe, and maybe some parts of South America and Asia. Most of the people in India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, and we can name more countries in this group, work in the informal economy, as we name it. Working in the informal economy comes with many risks, one of them being the chance of being laid off more easily than when you have a contract. And because of the precarity that comes as a result of the lack of protections, they want to look for something that's more protective in theory. And that's very important to distinguish because in theory, when they come here, they're covered by an employment contract, right? So they have the rights that a Romanian worker has. But as we know, in the past 10 to 20 years, as workers' rights have been eroded, only lately regaining part of the strength, what we have is that in theory, everything looks amazing. In practice, workers feel a certain pressure to not speak up when there is a work accident, when they're overworked, when they're not paid enough, because they feel that they may not get another job. And that for migrants may be even more pressure.
What are the sectors where most of these foreign workers are employed? And in what way they receive the same salaries as Romanians for the same position, etc.
So beforehand, it's interesting you asked me that part about the salaries. A couple of, if I'm not mistaken, maybe before 2017 or we can double check this later. But for a Romanian company to bring in a foreign worker, they had to give a higher salary than to a Romanian worker, and that minimum wage, I mean, and that was given by the fact that you had to show that you really couldn't find the Romanian worker. So it was very much discouraging, saying that instead you should really look inwards, look at your country, and see what you can offer your own people. It's roughly the same nowadays, though nowadays there is no pay discrimination, if we can call it like that, just for the sake of simplicity. So you can pay a migrant worker the same wage as a Romanian worker. In fact, if we really look at it, we realize that those migrant workers are coming in the country because the Romanians do not want to pick up the jobs that are available. And one of the reason is that it's basically not enough money for them to live on. And maybe, the working conditions are not good and there's not enough money and they realize, okay, I don't want to put up with this job. It's 2024. I've sacrificed so many years of my life working for a different company, for the government. I want some dignity. It's a question of dignity. Though there are many people in the country that treat it as a question of laziness. And what I mean by that is that they say, oh, Romanians are lazy, they want to pick up the job, we have to bring in Asian workers. False narrative. That's a false narrative, and that reinforces only what we've been having until now, a very damaging work discourse, I would say. But to answer your first part of the question, sorry, I'm kind of jumping around a bit. They mostly work in construction, in food and beverage, and we do get a couple of people working in shops, but it's mostly construction. And some of them work in the industry, like manufacture. But okay, sorry, I have to correct myself. So construction, food and beverages, and a very specific part of them work in the food delivery sector, and especially on the platform apps. So there are people that deliver food around Bucharest, Cluj, Timișoara, one of the big cities. Lots of them in traffic right now are people that come from Asian and African countries.
Okay, how do Romanian society and Romanian state welcome these non-EU workers and treat them?
Okay, so in theory, everything should be amazing because the law probably have the same issue in Bulgaria. I won't be surprised. Is that the law? It's strong enough. It's not the best, but strong enough to, in theory, make you very powerful as a worker and give you a lot of respect. In practice, it is different. So I mentioned in the beginning of the interview that they didn't increase the worker, let's say the contingent that could come in Romania to 140,000 because the directorate that deals with immigration doesn't have enough funds and people. So that's one of the main issues, the fact that we do not have enough staff working in those governmental agencies to deal with the migrant workers from Asia and Africa. A second issue is the fact that the war in Ukraine has been going on for the past 2 years and 2 months, maybe at this point, or 3 years, 3 years actually. Is it 3 years? Yeah, it's the third year, but it's been going on for 2 years. And that has been a big problem because a lot of focus has been given to Ukrainians. There's no problem in that, but there hasn't been any money available for those Asian and African workers who oftentimes face abuses, face discrimination, but there are very little to no organizations that deal with them, and that's sad. It's not because people do not care in the country, it's because, as we know, with lots of those NGOs function on a project basis, so they require funds, and to access funds, you need to have someone that will give you the money, a patron, and the patron oftentimes can impose conditions such as I want to work with Ukrainian migrants only, or I want to work only with refugees. They're neither Ukrainian migrants, they're no refugees, so they're stuck in a limbo for now. But I'm fairly optimistic that the situation will change. But that's at the level of institutions and organizations. I think it's important also to look at people. And I know lots of people that are against migrants and tend to be racist, though maybe there is a little bit of patriotism in me that doesn't want to generalize it. I don't think everyone looks at them and attributes a negative stereotype when they see a migrant worker in traffic or on a construction site. And I think people are more willing to welcome them than they're willing to, shoo them away or like kick them out of the country. I think both of those elements exist, and you can see it on Instagram. So, for example, this is a little tip maybe for the journalists. When they want to research migrants that come to an Eastern European country, they should go on TikTok or they should go on Instagram and look at the videos they post. It's a bit difficult to find, but it's not impossible. And there you see the way they look at the country. Lots of them feel okay being here. I mean, for some of them, it's a performative action because they want to show people back home they're okay here. They may not be, but they want to show that. But also in the comments, you see the way Romanians react to those videos. Some of them are happy, as I've seen it. I commented on a couple of them. I said, welcome to Romania. We're very grateful to have you here. Thank you for your service. But there are also very Like there are very racist people that just look at their skin color and think they're, I don't know, monkeys or anything else. But again, I don't want this to be a generalization, because I'm not that pessimistic or nihilistic, and I don't think all people are like that. I think it's a group. I don't think it's a majority. I think it's a group, but there are also lots of people willing to welcome them and talk to them and learn from them.
Okay, can you tell me more about the efforts of trade unions or NGOs to defend workers' interests? What has been going on in this direction in Romania?
Unions are in a controversial position. I work with the labor union, uh, but unions are in a controversial position in the fact that in 2022, one of them, not the one I work with, but a different one, I think, or two different ones, I'm not sure, voted in favor to limit the ability of migrant workers to change their job in the first year, arguing that it is a risk factor for the employer. So basically, they took the side of the employer. On the other hand, unions and migrant workers in Romania have a very weak relationship yet, and that is a problem in my opinion. I don't think it's not a relationship based on ignorance. Some of them do, some of them don't want to deal with migrants. I cannot give you specific examples because I only know, I've heard gossips, let's say. But I know for a fact that in 2019, at Alroslatina, somewhere in the southwestern part of the country, somewhere in that area, Indian migrant workers were not paid, or they were paid 10 cents a month, and the Romanian workers and the Indian workers showed solidarity. So they staged a strike, which was a beautiful moment, very beautiful, because striking back then was more difficult, and they were showing that they're brothers. In fact, we're brothers and sisters. I think for now we haven't seen a lot of unionization of migrant workers, which is a drawback. One of the reasons is that unions do not have enough capacity to organize. Unions have not been focused on organizing, which is sad, but it's something we can all change. But there is also a cultural barrier in the fact that many people do not know how to approach the migrant workers, because they think there is a very big cultural divide between them, which I don't agree with. And I think that's just a cognitive dissonance. It's an own barrier you impose upon yourself, because we can say that about any culture. Vladimir, you and I can say that in Bulgaria there is a very there is a very different environment than Romania, and thus I cannot understand it. I draw a wall between you and I, but instead what we can do is we can build bridges between people, and I think that's what I would like to see. And those bridges need to be built as soon as possible, because we're going to see more and more workers, migrant workers, coming in the country. I think what I've been seeing in the past months, organizations not as much, but individuals, I've seen more individual actions. I've seen more researchers reaching out to me. I've seen more people like trying to get in contact with migrants to understand. I've seen people going to their traditional restaurants, talking to them, understanding their struggles. But the problem is that oftentimes lots of those people have done that and came back to me, said that I do not know what I can do, what else I can do. And that's a fair point, because we have no idea what else we can do in some of these situations. And I think that's very emblematic in the whole discourse I was telling you about, the fact that there isn't enough focus given yet to those migrants, because there is the war happening, and also because it's a fairly new phenomenon for Romanians. We're not used to it. And I think we're going to have soon a billion of them in the country. It's going to be almost 5% of the country are going to be non-EU Asian African workers coming here, or even more than 5%. And that's going to be a shock for many Romanians. I'll tell you that. I don't think it's going to be necessarily a negative shock, but something will have to change, because that will be a matter of how do we open up our arms for those people, because there will be people that will try to antagonize us against them, and I don't want that to happen.
Finally, Romania has just entered into the Schengen area, and from now on, it can also liberate Schengen visas. How is that affecting or influencing the situation with the third countries' workers? given that now maybe they can get visa through Romania and maybe go to some other place to work if they have problems in Romania.
Yeah. I don't think we've seen enough of that yet. It's been only what, 2 weeks? Yeah, it's been only 2 weeks. So we do not know what's gonna happen. I think that's a good question. But I was thinking you're gonna ask me this. There will be people that will try to leave. That's You cannot stop that because it's been happening already. Like even before this Schengen, Air Schengen, and whatever it's called happened, people were trying to leave illegally Romania, across the border, by foot, and that has many reasons. And one of them is the fact that yeah, they may look for better employment, maybe they were in a sketchy situation here, yada yada. There are many things there happening. I would say that instead of focusing on this quite, I don't want to call it xenophobic or racist, but it tends to be in that direction. This speech about, oh, how many of them are gonna leave? We're gonna fuel migration to Europe. I don't think that's what we should look at. Instead, we should look at the reasons why they're leaving Romania. Because I mean, okay, so we joined Air Schengen, and there are still migrants in Bucharest. I meet them every day. I talk to a couple of them every week. Not that many may have left or try to leave the country in that sense. So some of them want to stay here, and some of them want to stay here because they want to have a life here in a certain to a certain degree. And that's what I would ask if I were the Romanian authorities: is what can we do to provide the others who try to leave a better living and working condition in the country. But that's quite far, I would say, and that's far because the way we look at migrant workers right now, it's we look at them as commodities, and that's fairly problematic. And again, we do not have enough manpower in the institutions to deal with them. And one of the effects of that is that they've tried to change the legislation recently to allow for we call it, to give the permission to renew your working permit by 2 years instead of one, saying that okay, you don't have to come every year, you can come every 2 years. And that's not only emblematic of the fact that okay, maybe they trust the workers more, but also they do not have the capacity to process that many of them anymore. So the number has increased drastically, and you need people now to actually, you need more people to face the situation. But I don't think I want to end this conversation on a negative tone. I think I want to emphasize the fact that there's so many of them, and there will be more and more coming. It's not something we need to stop. I dislike people that say we need to stop this, they're going to colonize our country or anything. It's not going to happen. What I like about it is that it brings cultural dialogue. It brings not cultural dialogue, it brings diversity in the cultural dialogue. It exposes Romanians to something they have not seen before, maybe some of them. It makes the country vibrant. But if we talk about the work and industrial relations, what needs to happen is we need more unions to step in and actually do work, and the government to protect them, because there is a very big chance, not a very big chance, there is a chance that they can be utilized against the workers in Romania themselves in a situation. And by that, I mean the fact that you can always pay a migrant less than a Romanian worker. So you can tell the Romanian, okay, you cannot demand 500 euros anymore. It's just an example. You have to accept 400 because a migrant will take 380. So that's something I think we have to keep in mind. But in the meantime, I think there's a lot of nihilism and pessimism about it in the media, and I understand why. But I think I also urge people to talk more to migrants. They're nice people, all of them. I've met all the nicest people, and some of them that, maybe a bit more conservative than I am. We have to understand where they're coming from, expose them to what Romania has to offer, and welcome them here. Not only the conservatives, but everyone, really.
Uh, you won some time ago a scholarship which led you to Nepal, and you had to research
Yeah.
exactly labor relations. Do you think that the experience which Romanians have and will have with migrant workers will, from third countries, from Asian countries especially, will make them be more sincerely interested in knowing these countries and these people?
Oh, absolutely, but that's valid for anyone. It's not only for Asians or Africans. It's valid for Americans, British people, Italians, anyone. That's just for me. That's active governance. It's direct or it's just democracy almost. It's active citizenship. I think that's the word I was looking for. Active citizenship. You don't have to only look at your family and your house when you think about society, and you have to look at what's happening around it as well. I think that's very important. And that's important because one, as a person, you can learn a lot, and two, you also have a duty. And I emphasize it's a duty. It's not like, oh, you have the chance. It's a duty. You are a Romanian, you're born in Romania, and you should help the others that come here to live a better life as well. Because by helping them, you can also help yourself in the situation. Labor rights is not something that we're talking only about labor now, but labor rights is not something that only applies to Romanian workers. Again, if the labor rights for migrants are going to become less and less, we can expect the same to happen for Romanians. And people have written about this for decades, for centuries. So if we want to be strategic, we have to come around and establish more solidarity networks. And then on an individual basis, we just need to get out of our houses because people have been becoming so individualistic lately that they only care about their family and their little house. They're like, nothing matters for me but the family and the house. And I dislike those people and I think they're selfish and I think they know nothing about the world and what they instead of opening their arms, they just close their hearts because they're so afraid. They think that everything is dangerous, and everyone is trying to get them. A migrant will not kill you here. There is no chance that it is more likely or something to happen because of him than the Romanian. I mean, the last part shouldn't be in the interview because it's stupid what I said, but why I mean is that we should open our hearts to them.